America could have so much in common with my bloodline. It's astounding. I mean, I have my eyes have been open. You know, even if you're a person that don't do a lot of research on your genealogy, on your background, on your bloodline, being a so-called African American, this is a great start. If you need any type of information, if you just want to know a little bit about your history, where you come from, anything, this is a great start because you know, just being a person of color and having stories flipped on you, not knowing exactly who to reach to, or not knowing exactly what foundation to go through. This is the perfect start right here. Just knowing that there's somebody that got your back, somebody that's willing to take those steps to get you to know not the fable, not the fiction, but the honest to God truth. So I definitely encourage all my peers, all my peoples out there to get involved and to find out exactly where you come from. This is a great start. So I encourage all my peoples to, you know what I'm saying, look into your genealogy and start with Michael. Michael's a great person, and he's going to definitely lead you
we
the right
live
way.
right now. Look up Khan Naga 69 YouTube.
The presumed African origins of colored people in the South have more of a fictional basis than a reliable historical foundation. As we have mentioned in several past episodes, the so-called African blood is almost always Indian blood. There is no documented evidence in the transatlantic slave trade that could account for the overall population of so-called blacks in the South. This is the biggest hole in their African theory. How did all of these Africans arrive into the Deep South? Through what port did they arrive? New Orleans? Biloxi? Did they arrive in Charleston and then trek across the entire continent? What series of voyages recorded in the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database documents the over 4 million blacks in the South originating from Africa? These are just a few questions we will attempt to answer.
And we live right now, YouTube, Khan Naga 69. Post your comments.
Conditions for colored people in the South were always highlighted by a myriad of government and private schemes looking to steal indigenous land. This ultimately led to the skepticism Americans had in dealing with the government, which is also a primary reason why some indigenous people didn't want their children educated in the newly established Negro public schools, looking to push the agenda for black literacy. They were by and large untrusting of the government, especially in the South. But if you fast forward a couple of generations, Negroes in the North...
No. If you fast forward a couple of generations, a few generations, we still maintain that skepticism of our government with good cause. If it wasn't for it being in our DNA, distrust Uncle Sam.
Hey, we live right now on YouTube. Khan Naga 69.
Too long ago, that jabby jab. That, you know, experimental thing that wasn't really tested but was rushed to the market, and, you know, through executive orders they also gave the vaccine manufacturers immunity against all wrongdoing. Black Americans were not falling for that okie doke. They tried their hardest. Oh my God. They had all the celebrities saying, black folks, you got to get the shot. They was in our neighborhoods canvassing, trying to run the psyops, running gangs. Talking about we were the ones at the most risk. We got to get the shot. We got to get the shot. We said, hell nah. And with good cause, because look how many of them white folks ended up getting different reactions to the shot, getting fucked up, dying from the shot. Y'all, it was crazy. And you see, we learn from the error of our ancestors. We've got a deep distrust of Uncle Sam.
And we live right now.
YouTube, Khan Naga, with Southern roots, would soon be looking for the government to enforce their civil rights. In general, this idea may be a little dangerous for the Southern Negro to petition the government for rights. Brother, what you talking about? Should I then go petition Massa for a 401k and dental? A dangerous proposition for a Mississippian, fresh off the chain. However, in the South, the Klan was its own government. You've heard the legend about how black people have fought and died for their chance to vote. The popular opinion was that the Klan was actually created to suppress the black vote. The first real post-Civil War movement to disenfranchise colored people was this anti-voting movement inspired by the Ku Klux Klan, literally designed to subvert the Republican Party, especially the participation of so-called blacks within politics in general. At the time, the Republican Party was really the only party a so-called colored man had a chance to have a platform in. Indeed, the Klan is a political group, although some historians may push back and say that the Klan really...
Guys, terrorism. They didn't even want us to vote. So they showed up to voting polls and shot us and shit on some purge type shit. I mean, guys, if you're a long-term viewer, if you're one of the people that book a genealogy consultation with me, break bread, hit the Cash App at the PayPal, I want you to have a little glimpse into what you're funding here.
And other splinter cells of white supremacy.
You see, back in these times, it was actually imperative to be able to cast your vote. Voting, having a say in your local government and the policies that are implemented, I mean, it was everything. It was such a new invention to these Europeans. I mean, they stole it from us, the whole democratic process. Look it up if you don't believe me. They come from Europe, right? Kings and queens and monarchs. They don't know a goddamn thing about democracy. They stole that from the Iroquois Confederacy and the Creek Confederacy. We taught them savages how to be democratic, checks and balances, different branches of government. But it's very, very interesting that most people don't know that the KKK wasn't just about terrorizing black folks and scaring them and lynching them, but they had specific missions in mind. And the first one was to prevent us from voting. Now, we know nowadays in 2025, voting does not have the same weight that it used to. We all know it's rigged, two wings of the same bird. But back in those times, voting meant the world. And the KKK was predicated off of keeping us from having a say in what goes on around us in our own ancestral homeland. I mean, God damn it. Think about it, y'all. Think about it. Couldn't even vote.
And we live on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga.
Why don't we get any purge movies about black folks trying to go vote for the first time and the KKK shows up?
We live on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga.
We can't get no purge movies like that, but we get those terrible D-rated purge movies that they've been making as of late, right? I'm just saying, there's so many untold stories. So many untold stories.
It was an inherent, yet fundamental hatred among Confederate whites and their feelings toward Negroes.
Hey, we live.
Went far beyond just racism. Most of the socially prominent men in the South were former Confederate soldiers who had just lost the war and the right to hold public office. But most of the voting socially active Negroes were veterans of the victorious Union Army. It was already bad enough they lost the war, but losing the election to a nappy-headed tar baby made them Confederate crackers downright saltine.
Hey, we live on YouTube.
In the areas where colored participation was more active, so were the Pink Pillagers. In 1866, in Memphis and New Orleans, two cities with significantly higher populations of freedmen, after the war, there were scenes of massacre and riots. In both cases, the police departments in Memphis and New Orleans were involved in the perpetuation of terrorism against its colored citizens. In Memphis, Negroes were destructively pushed out of the city, resulting in a significant reduction of the Memphis Negro population. Men were tortured, beaten, and killed. Women were raped.
Hey, we live on YouTube.
And churches were burned. But there was also another underlying factor to this bad blood. The hate Irish immigrants had for the newly enfranchised Americans. The Irish were just getting their foot in the American door, as most Irish non-indigent servants were first or second generation. And now their jobs are getting taken away by the newly ascended Negroes.
And we live.
The Memphis Police Department was notoriously corrupt and routinely threatened and harassed colored Union soldiers. Nearly all police officers in Memphis at the time were Irish immigrants. These Mickey Thickies got their willies wet tormenting Negroes, so they took special exception to seeing Negroes in uniform wielding firearms, who would at times intervene when the police would senselessly beat citizens in the streets. The consequence of this tension between Irish police officers and black Union soldiers led to the 1866 massacre. Other areas were also affected by other forms of mob violence. Resentful rebels ran roughshod and created the conditions of chaos, danger, and uncertainty that people hadn't experienced since before the war.
Hey, we live on YouTube.
Because now the recently emancipated people who are being threatened now have arms. This always instilled within whites fear of black retribution.
Hey, we live on YouTube. Khan 69.
If the frontier west of the Mississippi was called the Wild West, then this was the savage South. And if the whites weren't afraid of Negro insurrection, they were under the constant threat of the wild black rapist and his big black snake that'll make even the purest white woman moan.
Get your ass back in my house.
And them good old boys would stop at nothing to keep those mangy, blue-pretty claws on Bessie's milky white skin. And if that meant they had to fabricate rape narratives, so be it. Them boys were running wild. So wild that after Grant won the presidency, he sent the military down south to corral the Klan and their cronies. This act is monumental for being possibly the first time the American government intervened against whites for the protection of so-called blacks. After the military was sent by Grant, the Klan was thwarted, but was not completely destroyed. The members were still out there pulling stunts, but their power had been
and we live on YouTube.
This marks the end of the first KKK era. However, the Klan would rise again. Who were these so-called black people being terrorized by the Klan? The conventional belief was that all these black people who had formerly been enslaved were Africans. But was that true? For context, we are referring to the so-called colored people from Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. The most pressing question would be, if all of these so-called black people were transported from Africa, by what means did they reach the Deep South? Is there any evidence in the transatlantic slave trade database that the number of people representative of the black population in the Deep South went through any of the ports in that area? The largest slave trading port in this area was New Orleans.
Come on, y'all. We talked about the secret war that the KKK waged against Native Black Americans, but now let's get into this whole misnomer that we all descend from West African slaves. I mean, where are the slave boats? Where are the manifests? Where are the insurance documents? Guess what? I've read them. I've seen them. Slaves did come from Africa to North America. But guess what? It was barely any at all. Less than 4% of the African slaves trafficked during the transatlantic slave trade, less than 4% came to North America. The research that I've done has indicated between 50,000 to 90,000 African slaves came to North America, what would later be known as the United States. Guys, we've got over 42 million Black Americans present day. You can't Get 42 million Black Americans from a sample population size of 50 to 90,000 African slaves. That's logistically impossible. But let's get on into it, shall we?
And there are a few others. But to put these statistics in context, according to the database, less than 10,000 Africans disembarked at the port of New Orleans throughout the entirety of the slave trade, from as early as 1719 to 1860. But the Black population in the South was in the millions. Are we really supposed to believe that the millions of Negroes in the Deep South were descended from just a couple of thousand Africans recorded in the database? As mentioned previously, the largest slave ports were on the east coast of the United States. Places like Maryland, Virginia, and New York had the highest number of slaves entering and exiting through their ports. And cities like Charleston and Savannah were the closest major ports in the Deep South. And yet that location is nowhere close to the millions of so-called Negroes along the Mississippi. And to assume that a shipment of Africans could arrive at Charleston and then trek over 1,000 miles across the country, over the Appalachian Mountains, and to the river by slave traders is an asinine, Assa 10, Assa 11 assumption. These people who were enslaved had always lived on the land, but were eventually pushed out, first by the French, prior to the French-Indian War, and then later the British, and then the Americans after the Revolution. The majority of these people enslaved in the Deep South were descendants of the tribes along the Mississippi, like the Natchez, the Chitimacha, the Choctaw, the Creek, and Chickasaw, just to name a few. Any scholastic citation that accounts these people along the Mississippi River as African is patently false and cannot be substantiated by any historical documentation or even in the transatlantic slave trade database.
How Afro get in front of my mother race. I ain't never been to Afro color. I ain't never been to Africa. Afro or Africa. Never been there. I'm not from Africa. I'm born and raised in Goose, Florida. I'm born in Goose, raised in Liberty City in the Poker Bean Project. I ain't never went to Africa. Ain't thinking about going there. And I heard it's a beautiful place. Yes. And I know it's the motherland. Yes. But not my mother, not her mother, and not her mother's mother. That ain't their land. American real true land is right here in the U.S. soil.
The Klan would rise again. After the release of quite possibly the first blockbuster movie of all time, The Birth of a Nation, by D.W. Griffith. The movie glorifies the Klan and promoted the idea that Klansmen were heroes protecting the sanctity of white purity from the savage Negro. The picture has been described by film critics as possibly the most racist movie of all time, but also one of the greatest works of early cinematography, a masterpiece of racism. Racism and politics are a central theme of the movie. But also, another recurring theme is the renegade Negro rapist. In the movie, Southern whites are portrayed as being unfairly treated by the newly installed Union government, promoting the idea that the poor whites were denied the right to vote while blacks unfairly stuffed the ballot box. Welcome back to Charlatan's Web. Quote, The Birth of a Nation is a 1915 American silent epic drama film directed by D.W. Griffith and starring Lillian Gish. The screenplay is adapted from Thomas Dixon Jr.'s 1905 novel and play, The Klansman. Griffith co-wrote the screenplay with Frank E. Woods and produced the film with Harry Aitken. The Birth of a Nation is a landmark of film history, lauded for its technical virtuosity. It is the first non-serial American 12-reel film ever made. Its plot, part fiction and part history, chronicles the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by John Wilkes Booth and the relationship of two families in the Civil War and Reconstruction eras over the course of several years. The pro-Union Northern Stonemans and the pro-Confederacy Southern Camerons. It was originally shown in 2 parts, separated by an intermission, and it was the first American-made film to have a musical score for an orchestra. It helped pioneer close-ups and fade-outs, and it includes a carefully staged battle sequence with hundreds of extras, made to look like thousands. It came with a 13-page souvenir program. It was the first motion picture to be screened inside the White House, viewed there by President Woodrow Wilson, his family, and members of his cabinet.
Come on, even if y'all have heard about the Birth of a Nation film, y'all didn't realize this, did you? The first major American blockbuster, you know, it was funded by some small hats too. We ain't gonna get into all that. But first major motion film played in the White House, watched by the president, and it directly resulted in the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. This film resulted in the death, the butchering, the rape, and the massacre, the genocide of Native Black Americans. Now you see how important media is. Now you see why I'm doing what I'm doing in the realm of media. Why I say that you guys are funding future media projects. Media is everything. We have to have control over our story. And if you've yet to trace your family lineage, if you've yet to get a clear understanding of what your family story is, then check out my website, NativeBlackAncestry.com, and schedule a consultation.
I came across Mike on YouTube, and I decided to give his service a try. I booked the consultation. He was on time. He was very lenient. I was a little bit late. He was on time, but no worries. So he took care of me. And we started off with a history lesson and about the Pueblo people, or the ancestral people of this land, what they look like as from the testimonials of the original Spaniards. He walked me through the process of the areas of the nation that these folks were located in, and he actually traced it all the way back to my home city of Philadelphia. But anyway, and he also went into Ancestry, broke that down for me to show me how I could do it on my own or use his service. And he was very concise and very professional. And as I stated before, it's almost like a history lesson, a great history lesson on the very high possibilities that one of my family members are part of a Native American tribe. So I recommend his service, and I'm going to recommend it to my other family members as well. So with that being said, yes, give him a try. It's awesome.
Woodrow Wilson, by the way, a staunch racist and supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. The film was controversial even before its release and has remained so ever since. It has been called the most controversial film ever made in the United States and the most reprehensibly racist film in Hollywood history. The film has been denounced for its racist depiction of African Americans. The film portrays its black characters, many of whom are played by white actors in blackface, as unintelligent and sexually aggressive toward white women. The Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist far-right hate group, is portrayed as a heroic force that protects white women and maintains white supremacy. Popular among white artists nationwide upon its release, the film's success was both a consequence and a contributor to racial segregation throughout the United States. The film's success was both a consequence and a contributor to racial segregation throughout the United States. In response to the film's depictions of black people in Civil War history, African Americans across the United States organized and protested. In Boston and other localities, black leaders and the NAACP spearheaded an unsuccessful campaign to have it banned on the basis that it inflamed racial tensions and could incite violence.
Damn. If you don't have a grasp of history, you won't be able to see the direction where we're heading. But I hope you guys learned something here this evening. I'll be live later in the week. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Shout out to all of our live viewers. Shout out to everybody watching the replay. Stay vigilant, and I'll see you next time.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British, man. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the G's, and they mixed them, and this shit get way deeper than your pigment.
Are you ready for an unforgettable journey through Black history? This March, I'm inviting you. Americans' blood is unquestionably Indian. This is another book called The Philosophical and Antiquarian Aboriginal History of America. This book is journal accounts from Vizcaíno, Torquemada, and Cortez that documents Black Indians.
Hey, we live on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga 69.
In fact, y'all know me as the King of Receipts.
Post your comments there.
Let me see if I can bring up a quick excerpt from this book. I really love to share this book in particular because this was the book that had the
hey, we live on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga 69.
Written record of Black Indians in North America. Let me see. I know I've got an excerpt somewhere.
Hey, we live on YouTube. Look up
yes.
Khan Naga 69 YouTube.
Yeah, I got to live up to the name, Casey. I got to live up to it. If you'll call me the King of Receipts, the ruler of receipts, I got to hit you with the receipts. Again, this is that same book, Philosophical and Antiquarian, concerning the Aboriginal History of America.
Hey, we live on YouTube.
America possesses some dark brown men approaching to be black, yet it has been almost universally believed that there were no Aboriginal blacks or Negroes found on this continent. So listen, guys, they're starting off saying, hey, we don't think there's Black Indians in North America. Bro. But let's keep reading. But from considering the peculiar circumstances under which a black race was found in North America, I hold it worth.
Hey, we live on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga 69.
Nobody cares.
First they say, hey, we don't think black folks are indigenous to America. Then they say, okay, we found a whole black race of them, so they got to be indigenous.
Hey, we live on
Torquemada
YouTube.
says the Californians showed no manner of surprise at the sight of some Negroes that accompanied Vizcaíno on a voyage to the coast. Because remember, guys, the Spanish conquistadors took Moorish North African slaves to teach them how to get to America, and also because the North Africans spoke Hebrew, and most of the indigenous tribes in America spoke a different, version of Hebrew one way or another. So it's saying that when again, these aren't black Indians, but these are the lighter-skinned Indians, the fair-skinned Indians.
And these live on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga 69.
Spanish conquistadors, they're not surprised. Matter of fact, it says that when a Negro was ordered to distribute a biscuit to the Californians at the Bay of St. Barnabas, quote, the natives seemed greatly pleased at the sight of the Negro, and they signified to him that they lived in friendship and correspondence with the people of his color, and that not far from them was the Negro village.
Look up Khan Naga 69 YouTube.
So again, the light-skinned Indians see these Negroes with the Spanish conquistadors, and they say, hey, niggas, that's what's up. We got a whole village of Negroes. We got a whole links of friendship with these black Indians over here. Torquemada undertakes to explain this remarkable circumstance by supposing that the Negroes had been left there by a ship from the Philippine Islands, but he does not quote the time when such an event had occurred, so we presume it was mere conjecture of his own to explain an anomaly of which he was previously ignorant.
Let me see your name on YouTube. Look up Khan Naga 69.
But it has been found on extending our researches that the Negro character of the Indians on this coast has been distinctly remarked by various navigators, even of the present day. Let's talk about it, y'all. Let's talk about it. But again, we're going to share some books, since a homie asked for books. Speaking of the Negroes on the California coast, this is Tales of the Knights of
Isla. YouTube.
This is the Queen of California. This is the earliest written record of the tales of the Black Amazonian Indian Queen of California. I believe her name was Queen Califia, which is what the state of California is named after. They try to claim that this was just a myth started by a Spaniard.
We live on YouTube. Khan Naga 69 YouTube.
The first written account of this Black Indian princess queen.
Your shit not good, bro.
Written about by these Spanish Europeans. And when I talk about this Amazonian queen, this was the direct inspiration for Wonder Woman. Yes, you heard that right. A black queen named Queen Califia, who the state of California is named after. She was also the inspiration for Wonder Woman. Say it ain't so. Another book, The History of the American Indians by
Hey, we live.
So if you want books, I got books for you, Playboy. But let's see, what other dumb shit this dude is talking about? I can't spend much more time on him, but and again, make sure to shoot me an email if you guys want to get the genealogy consultation at the discounted rate of $50. I am giving.
Because they're back. for their oppressor and master. The slave trade was extremely profitable for both areas of the country, North and South. Southern plantations had the highest concentration of American black slaves, and as a result of this free labor, the U.S. was now the world's #1 cotton exporter. This didn't just mean Southern whites got rich, but Northern whites as well. The North was able to build industry around slavery, including, but not limited to, banking, insurance, transportations, manufacturing, and textiles.
And we live on YouTube. Khan Naga.
By 1900, the U.S. had become a dominant world power, built off the backs of the true Americans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that's all I have for you this evening. Again, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. Hit the Cash App or the PayPal.
Days of Columbus formed a revolution against the French. The natives defeated the French, committing Napoleon Bonaparte to a humiliating defeat at the hands of slaves. In 1804, Haiti claimed its independence from France. The French had been no less evil than the British or the Spanish. Taino and African people had been subjected to the worst conditions working on sugar plantations. It was even documented that pregnant women would abort their own children rather than to have them born into captivity. After years of complaints by abolitionist Europeans about the malicious treatment of slaves, the British passed the Slave Trade Act of 1789 and 1807, which restricted the number of slaves that could be transported within one vessel. Although this would seem more humanitarian in a sense, this law was in actuality passed to protect big business from insurance fraud.
And we live on YouTube.
If UBTV jumps into it in this video, but another
look up Khan Naga 69 YouTube.
Is if you look at the population of slaves in the 13 colonies, I believe they stopped importing slaves from Africa in 1808. But if you see the years after,
You want to see your name on YouTube? Look up Khan Naga 69 YouTube.
Double, triple, quadruple. It just gets larger and larger and larger. And again, you have to ask, if they're not importing any more slaves, and these slaves that are already here can't have babies at this fast of a rate, where are all these new slaves coming from? These slaves are taken as prisoners of war from skirmishes that the U.S. government has with indigenous tribes.
And we live on
They took
YouTube.
them, reclassified them, enslaved them. They took them, reclassified them, enslaved them. And if they ran away or weren't a good slave, then they'd ship them to the Caribbean or ship them to Europe or ship them elsewhere. Long before the transatlantic slave trade, there was an Indian slave trade that no one talks about.
And we live on YouTube. Khan Naga
After
69
the Zong
YouTube.
massacre, in which 130 African slaves were massacred and or thrown overboard, the British would be the first invader Europeans to push for the abolishment of slavery. But of course, this idea wouldn't stick and would eventually evolve into various forms of capitalistic slavery that we still suffer from today.
Controlling Bravo. Secured.
The Atlantic Ocean is the world's most massive slave graveyard. Beneath these waters rest an innumerable amount of souls, relinquishing their last breath of life into the treacherous, lonely abyss of the great deep. When invaders arrived to the Americas and started conquering Indians, any native who did not submit to the crown and the Pope was either tortured and killed or taken into slavery.
He's knowledgeable about his information about the American Indians and how we change our classification over time in the different time.
During the American Revolution and thereafter, slave numbers nearly doubled by 1810. But the British signed the Slave Trade Act in 1787 and stopped shipping Africans by 1808. So where did all these new slaves come from?
Told you guys,
Message to you.
1808, they stopped importing slaves to North America.
We live on YouTube.
Well, how come from 1800s to 1810, we go from 851,000 slaves to 1.1 million? Come on, y'all. I think he's going to show some more graphs here that's going to highlight the fact that the math ain't mathing.
Less than 400,000 landed in America in the span of 367 years. Yet the slave population jumped by 400,000 in the span of 20 years. Women could not reproduce effectively under the stress of lifelong servitude. Most women carried their child until moments before conception, all while slaving her life away in the field. Where did this dramatic jump in population come from? Considering the supposed British abolishment of the African slave trade,
right, here we go. This is what I was looking for. This is 1810, right? 1808, they stopped importing slaves. Well, how come from 1810 to
We live on
1820
YouTube.
we get an
Kanaga,
extra
6'9".
400,000
This for you.
slaves? How come from 1820 to 1830 we get an extra, 400,000 slaves? From 1830 to 1840s we get another, almost 500, 600,000 slaves. How is the slave population growing at such an alarmingly fast rate if they're not importing slaves anymore? The birth rate can't support this data. The birth rate does not support slaves living under harsh conditions, malnutrition, beaten, chained, being able to increase their population under natural means.